Hello and welcome, my name is Shadow Retro and today we will be covering the new Warframe, the 60th Warframe introduced to the game, Temple. Temple is definitely a Warframe that is focused around weapon platforms, setups. They have a lot of abilities that can increase their elemental damage, status chance, and also has a pretty cool exalted weapon. And while they are by no means a bad Warframe, they don't necessarily have a lot going on in their kit. I would probably say they're pretty mid-tier, but definitely be a lot of fun to play with. But before we get too much into the video, let's first start by explaining their kit. First of all, they're passive. As you can see, underneath your aiming reticle, Temple has a metronome of sorts with a area in the middle of it. Casting abilities within the middle of this will not only build up the meter, as you can see, but it will also give you a 50% efficiency for the cast of that ability. So you can see each time I do it, it builds up that meter. If I cast outside, it doesn't build up the meter. Casting Helminth abilities within the sweet spot will actually build up that meter, but Helminth abilities will not benefit from the additional 50% efficiency. Temple's first ability is Pyrotechnics. Pyrotechnics will summon a bunch of fire pillars on enemies that will also do a small damage of heat damage to an AoE area. Honestly, this ability doesn't really make sense in their kit because the rest of their kit is focused around weapon platform setup, and this ability does nothing for a weapon platform. It is purely a ability DPS ability, and it's not a very good one. I did actually go ahead and try to make a ability DPS nuke setup with Temple using this ability, and I'm not going to say it can't work because it could work, but it wasn't very good. If you put in enough time and effort, you can probably make it work better than what my end result was. But I basically came to the conclusion that the ability simply wasn't good enough for the amount of effort it took to make the build actually viable, when there are a ton of Warframes that can nuke just a whole lot more effectively. This is also Temple's Helminth ability, which is not very appealing because, quite frankly, the ability doesn't really do anything. Temple's second ability is when we get into the juice of the matter. Temple's second ability will summon 2 speakers that will play a debuff on enemies in a comb in front of Temple, increasing your crit chance on it by an absolute buff. By absolute, I mean that the crit chance applies as a flat number on top of your modded crit chance. So if you get a 50% absolute buff and your modded crit chance is 100, your crit chance would be 150. To show this, I will shoot enemies and you'll see I'll get yellow and orange crits. Then I will cast my second ability and you'll see I'll be getting mostly orange and a bit of red. And you'll see enemies affected by the ability will be highlighted by that red ring. If you activate the ability within time of the sweet spot, not only will it get benefit from the efficiency buff, but it will also fill up that meter, but it will also double the crit chance you get from the ability. Temple's third ability is Ripple Rail. Temple will go into an invulnerability state where he will heal himself, including his health and shields, and go into overshields. And once the ability turns off, both themselves and also all teammates in the ally will be given heat damage. Casting this ability or any of Temple's other abilities in the sweet spot will not only increase the duration of this ability, but it will also further increase the amount of heat damage it gets from this ability. And the heat damage has a maximum cap of 750%. And the heat damage doesn't mix with modded elements, just like all the other abilities that give elemental damage buffs now. Temple's fourth ability is called Exalted Solo. It will bring out an Exalted Flamethrower, which looks like a guitar. Casting the ability on the sweet spot will make it that so it doesn't cost any energy. Additionally, the weapon has infinite ammo, but it will drain your built-up charge within your sweet spot, as you can see. Casting abilities, even while the ability is activated, will still build up your sweet spot, meaning you can basically have 100% uptime on this ability. The weapon itself has relatively good stats, and as a flamethrower, it also has pretty high status chance, and it's pretty good when it comes to status applying. And overall, the weapon can result in being pretty powerful. As you can see. Because of this, Temple is obviously set up to be a weapon platform setup using their second ability, their third ability, and obviously their fourth ability if you so wish, or you could use any other weapon you want. And also I should mention their exalted weapon is an exalted primary weapon, and thanks to the recent changes in the game, it does take arcanes, exalted arcanes. Also, if you aim with the exalted weapon, you'll see that you can cast one of your abilities, that will give you a shock sound wave, kind of like a Tanaka Plasma kind of blast, that will force proc the modded element that is listed. So the first ability will send out a shockwave that will force proc viral. The second will force proc magnetic. Then we also have cold and obviously corrosive. My issue with this effect is the actual shockwave isn't very big, meaning it doesn't actually apply to enemies in a very big range, so you're not really going to get the most use out of it. So, what is my build set up for Temple? And what are my general thoughts on Temple? So I already kind of told you what my general thoughts on Temple were. I think they're pretty mid. Their second ability is pretty powerful, and absolute crit chance buff is really good, especially when that scales off strength. However, there are other Warframes that do it, and it only works on enemies that are immediately in your line of sight when you cast the ability. This means that this makes this ability very casty, and I have an issue with casty weapon platform Warframes. It's honestly my biggest issue with the Dagoth. The main benefit that weapon platform Warframes have is that they're not casty, that you can just cast your abilities and leave them active for like 40 seconds and not have to worry about them. So I feel like weapon platform Warframes that are casty, like Dagoth or now Temple, kind of ruin the point of weapon platforms in a way. And I just don't really enjoy playing weapon platform, casty weapon platform frames. I know that is a personal thing on my end, and that shouldn't be taken away if you enjoy them or not. And they are still pretty fun to play. I will admit, they're more fun than I thought they would be. But that is one of my issues with Temple. Secondly, another one of my issues is I did find that they had kind of slow KPM if you use their fourth ability. This isn't actually that surprising. I generally find weapon platform setups have a slow KPM anyway, depending on the weapon they're using. Yeah, unless you're using something like melee influence or just a really broken weapon like Torrid or a really big AoE weapon, you're probably going to end up with lower DPS than a nuke or a very high killing ability DPS setup. But that's just the nature of it. While their fourth ability is a pretty good weapon, it's a pretty powerful exalted weapon, it's nothing crazy and will be beaten by other weapons, like Torrid for example. So you only really want to use the fourth ability if you want to use it for the sake of using it, not for actual optimization, because there are 100% better weapons than it. And just because I got bad KPM doesn't mean that Temple is a bad Warframe or any means, because I was using the exalted weapon, and like I said, I'm not surprised I got bad KPM, because the exalted weapon is kind of just the kind of weapon that would relatively pump out a worse KPM than a weapon platform using, say, the Torrid or just nuking abilities setup. Additionally, the fact that he's so casty doesn't really help with it being his KPM in terms of weapon platform, because every moment I take to cast an ability, which is a lot because I have to recast the second ability often, also means less time I'm actually killing enemies. So the casting nature of them also doesn't go well when it comes to their KPM. Again, I'm not trying to say Temple's a bad Warframe. Temple's actually a pretty good Warframe. Their second is very powerful. The third gives you a pretty high fire elemental damage buff. They're just nothing that amazing, nothing that special. So I would very much give them a solid mid. Pretty good, but nothing that great. But let's actually go over my build. Now, well, my build is pretty simple. I am using the Exalted Weapon for DPS. The reason why I chose to do that is because I thought for this build at least, I would not necessarily go for optimization, but more go for the Spirit of Temple. And I feel like it was important to actually use the Exalted Weapon for anyone who wants to watch this video and also use the Exalted Weapon. They can see an example build. I might later on and go make a more optimized build for them. I'm not sure. We'll see how I feel. And then we are using their third ability for the extra heat damage, and we are using their second ability for the crit chance. My Helminth ability was Nourish. I actually wanted to use Raw. However, you cannot Helminth Raw onto any of Temple's slots except over the third, because the third counts as a damage buff. I think this is incredibly stupid. I think there is no reason in the universe why I should not be able to have both their third ability and Raw on the same setup if I can have Toxic Lash and Raw on Saren, when Toxic Lash is a much more powerful ability. It honestly makes no sense. I also think the fact that I can Helminth Nourish onto it also kind of proves my point, because I get that you can't use double up on damage buffs, but you can clearly double up on elemental damage buffs because I'm using Nourish, so why can't I have Raw and their third ability? I think this is a really dumb choice on DE's part, honestly. But because I can't have Raw, I have gone for Nourish, though Raw would have been a better choice anyway. Nourish does offer me utility though, because it means I need to worry about my energy less, and Viral is a very good damage type to have anyway, because it means I'll be doing more damage to enemies' health, and the Exalted Solo is actually a pretty good weapon when it comes to status applying, so I'm applying Viral on enemies pretty consistently. Anyway, let's actually have a look at the build now. I am using one Tower Forged Casting Speed Shard. Like I said, they are a very casty Warframe, and their casts don't necessarily take that long, but when you cast the second ability over and over and over again, it kind of gets annoying. So I would recommend putting at least a Tower Forged Ember Shard, or honestly even more Ember Shards, because the second ability does get really annoying when you just cast it over and over again. And like I said, the more time you spend actually casting your abilities, the less time you're killing enemies. So the ability, the aura can be whatever you want. I just didn't want to put a former over the aura, so I just went for Cross Objection. I am running Arcane Energize, which you don't need because I'm running Nourish, so this is honestly a complete waste. And I'm also running Arcane Aegis. I do want to talk about Hot Shot. Hot Shot is a new arcane that comes with this update, and it gives you crit chance to your weapons whenever you apply the heat status effect through abilities. This obviously works amazing on Temple. However, I haven't actually interacted with any of the new content in the update yet. I've just been too busy testing Temple and other stuff, so I don't have a version of Hot Shot, but I would recommend using it. Honestly, either Arcane Aegis or Arcane Energize could be replaced with Hot Shot. If you're running Nourish like me, I'd probably recommend getting Energize, because Energize is really not needed at all when it comes to Nourish. I just didn't know what else to put on him. Like, you could do Avenger, you could do Augmented, I suppose, but like, it really is just a flex shot. I just went for Energize for even more energy economy. I am doing a shield tank setup because their third ability does completely restore your shields. And so if you ever find your situation where your shields break, you can just activate your third ability, which will not only give you max shields, but it will also give you max over shields, making shield tank can actually work really well on them. So primary direction, adaptation, and fast deflection, as well as Aegis, to support the shield tank setup. Then I am running Stretch and Prime Continuity. Originally, I actually thought that Temple only needed Strength, but I realized you probably do want Stretch for your second ability, because the second ability only has a 20-meter range, which at first sounded like good enough, but I started to realize more and more that enemies further away weren't being affected by it, which was kind of annoying. So I would recommend to at least have Stretch on, just for that extra bit of range. Prime Continuity you wouldn't need normally, but since I'm running Nourish, I opted to have Prime Continuity, especially because I'm also running Tyranny of Fortitude. But unless you're running an ability that runs on a lot of duration like Nourish, you actually don't need duration at all. This is because their third ability is their only ability that relies on duration, and the third ability's duration increases each time you cast one of their abilities on the hotspot, so it doesn't matter. Transient Fortitude and Blind Rage for the power strength, and then obviously you're running Primed Flow for the energy economy. Now for the actual Exalted weapon setup, I'm running Primary Merciless. Obviously, this is a pretty staple on pretty much any primary weapon. And then we are running Sinister Reach to increase the range of the weapon. This should, assuming it works the same with the new old Exalted weapons, this should actually stack with range on Temple. So my Exalted weapon will actually have a very big range. That paired with the Punch Through from Prime Shred means I can actually wipe out enemies from quite far away, even through walls, which actually makes this weapon quite good still. Again, not necessarily good enough to keep up with KPM for life support, but still pretty good. We are running Prime Bane, or can highly recommend running a faction damage because it does double dip with status effects, and we are running a damage over time setup. We are actually running a blast setup. This is because the weapon itself does have inherent heat, and we can simply just put on rim rounds to give us additional blast. This works really, really well because blast is just a very good status effect. In addition to this, our third ability's heat doesn't mix with modern elements, so we're actually running a blast heat plus viral from Nourish. So we're running blast, heat, and viral, which works really, really well and can kill enemies quite effectively. We do have critical delay for the crit chance, and we obviously have our crit damage from Vital Sense, Galvanized Chamber for the multi-shot, of course, and then we have Galvanized Attitude for status chance, plus the extra damage per status effect applied onto enemies. I went with Taxon for my companion. This is because Taxon works really well with shield tank setups because of molecular conversion, which allows Taxon to perform a specific attack that will convert damage it does into shields for me. On top of that, I can also put on Shield Charger and Guardian to give me a lot of shield regen, giving me a lot of survivability when it comes to shield tank setups. We have Manifold Bond to lower the cooldown of all three of these mods, Momentumous Bond to make it so that when our companion dies, killing an Xmas unit will lower the respawn timer, Synth Deconstruct to drop extra health orbs, which is just nice to have, Calculator Redirection and Enhanced Vitality for the survivability of the companion, Assault Mode so the companion can actually attack enemies with its weapon, and Vacuum as a must-have mod. The weapon is obviously Tezuko because it is an amazing weapon when it comes to primary enemies for Sentinels. We have just reload speed, status chance, fire rate plus punch through, multi-shot, and then everything else is our status effects. Electric comes by default with Tezuko. We then have radiation, magnetic, and viral. For the utility weapons, I would recommend running Amalgam Serration on your rifle for the extra movement speed, Amalgam Barrel Diffusion on your secondary for the extra rolling speed, plus both Augur mods, Augur Pack and Augur Seeker, for additional survivability. And I would also recommend something along the lines of Predos, or one of the other Incarnate weapons, that will give you increased sprint speed, that will increase movement through the evolutions. Protos gives sprint speed and slide, and also parkour velocity through these 2 evolutions here. And for the focus skill, you can run whatever you want except Naramon, because this is a melee setup, and Naramon has no use outside of quick attack melee builds. Zenorek I'm using just to set up my energy economy, so I have enough to set up my damage rotation at the start of the mission. Additionally, Zenorek offers you with additional power strength if you wanted that. Vazrim will give you survivability and grouping. Yunara will give you armor strip and Matarai will give you casting speed and also additional power strength. Anyway, that is all. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed Temple. If you have any build ideas that you would like me to test with Temple, give me some ideas. I'm not opposed to trying other stuff with this Warframe. Like I said, I might go ahead and try and make a more optimized video, build for them, but I thought it was important to make a build focusing on their Exalted weapon just so people can have a template for that, and it still kills enemies really effectively. And if you're playing anything that isn't survival or playing with multiple people, then the KPM issue is not an issue at all. KPM only really matters in survival. But yes, I do hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed Temple. If you do enjoy Temple, tell me what you like about them. If you don't enjoy Temple and you think they have some issues that I didn't mention, leave them in the comments as well. I'll be interested to hear them. Like I said, by no means do I think Temple is a bad Warframe. I do think they have 1 or 2 things that stops them from being a really, really great Warframe. And since recent Warframes have got out, like Dante and even Sato 9 and Dante and Jade and even Sato 9, like Dante and Jade are both amazing Warframes, and Sato 9 is also really good. So he's up against tough competition when we're comparing them to recent releases. But by no means are they bad. Yes, do check out some other content. If you enjoyed this video, you might find some other stuff you like. Leave me a recommendation for any other Warframes you might like to see from me, or any other Warframe related content. I'm happy to take any recommendations. And also give me a subscribe, give me a like, and until next time. Bye bye.